Question: if you're in the United States and somebody next to you sneezes, what do you say? Probably, bless you, gesundheit, God bless you. What you might not know though is in Japan, if somebody sneezes, they don't say anything. This is an example of a polite phrase that doesn't exactly mean anything, but that people say to be polite. Do I literally mean that I wish that God would bless this person when she sneezes? Or am I actually saying, you know, Gesundheit, which is German for health? Am I saying health to her? No, I'm just being polite and doing what I'm supposed to do when she sneezes. Japan might not say anything polite in response to a person sneezing, but they do have other polite things that they say in certain situations that we don't exactly have in the English language. So I'm going to bring up a few of these phrases, and a lot of these phrases, if you have studied Japanese even just a year, or if you are an anime fan, you probably already have heard these phrases, and you've probably already seen translations and explanations for these phrases. But I'm going to go into a little deeper detail about how I, as a translator, when I'm localizing, actually wind up usually translating these phrases. So the first phrase, it's actually a set of phrases I'm going to talk about, is itadakimasu and gochisou-sama deshita. Now these are things, if you're not aware, itadakimasu is just something that people say before they start eating a meal. If they're really old school, they'll be like, itadakimasu, right before they eat their food. They'll like do a little prayer thing and a little bow. People in anime tend to do that a lot too, because it's kind of cute to do that. And then gochisou-sama deshita is something that people say after they finish eating the meal. And again, if they're old school, they'll be like, gochisou-sama deshita. Breaking down what these phrases actually mean, itadakimasu, it's actually a polite form of a polite verb, meaning to receive or to partake of something. So itadakimasu just simply means partake, but not the imperative form of that. It means I am going to partake, I shall partake, or you shall partake. There's no personal pronoun being used in that scenario. But it's generally understood to mean, okay, I shall partake of this food, is what itadakimasu means. Gochisou-sama deshita, gochisou by itself means feast. Like a wonderful feast. And then sama is just an honorable suffix, and then deshita means it's like the past tense. So what a wonderful honorific feast that was is kind of what gochisou-sama deshita means. The English language and Western culture simply doesn't have these phrases. We don't have, this is the thing that you say when you start eating a meal, this is the thing that you say after you finish eating a meal. So when we're translating it, we're presented with that problem, like, well, okay, how do we translate this? Now, I often have seen this in anime and in other things, that itadakimasu is translated as thanks for the food. That is a rather literal, accurate translation, but I always cringe when I see it, because how many people do you know actually say that when they sit down at a Western table to eat? You know, unless you're literally thanking the person across from you who made the food, say, oh, thanks for the food, like, oh, it looks so good. You know, you don't just like, everybody says, thanks for the food, and then they start eating. It's just very unnatural. That's what I call a Japaneseism in translation, and I don't like it. So when I'm asked to localize something fully, to avoid that pitfall, I might say something like, let's eat. That's usually the best I can do. Or yummy, or this looks great, or something, depending on who the character is and what the context is. Another thing that a person could do, especially if it's a very formal situation, and especially if it's a book or something where you don't have to match up the number of syllables to what you're translating to what they're actually saying, you could actually translate it as a very short prayer, because that is like the one equivalent that we have in Western culture. Is sometimes when people sit down to a meal, they will pray, like literally, before they eat. And it might be a long prayer, it might take like 2 minutes long. And then sometimes people, to be facetious, might say something like, rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub, or grace, and then start eating. So if it's that kind of character, the kind of character who would be facetious like that, then sometimes I'll translate itadakimasu as like grace, or rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub. Yeah, but thanks for the food doesn't do it for me usually, and I cringe whenever I see that as a translation. So gochisou-sama deshita, to me, I find one of the more relatable things that we say that's similar to gochisou-sama deshita, and it only works in certain scenarios. It only really works when a character's like taking up their plates and leaving as they're saying it. is in Western culture, if you're a younger person and you're eating at the table, you say, may I be excused? And it might be like as you're standing up, but you're being polite, like may I be excused? That's kind of, it's not at all what gochusou sama deshita actually means, but it's sort of like a thing that we say after we finish eating to be polite. We might also say, thanks for the food, that was delicious. Again, it's weird to say it before you start eating because you haven't actually eaten the food yet, but after you've eaten, sometimes we'll translate gochusou sama deshita as like, thanks, that was delicious, or something like that. The next pair of phrases that I'm going to talk about are phrases that are used after somebody has completed a task or a work day or something difficult. And these two phrases kind of mean the same thing, and they're kind of used interchangeably. They're gokuro sama deshita and otsukare sama deshita. And then shortened versions of those phrases like gokuro or otsukare. So gokuro sama deshita, broken down, kuro means to suffer, and then go, the prefix, is like a very honorific, and then sama, the suffix, is very honorific, and then deshita means like past tense. So it's sort of like, oh, you worked so hard, so honorably. And then otsukare sama deshita is quite similar. O is an honorific prefix, sama is an honorific suffix. Tsukare is from the verb tsukareru, which means to be tired, to get tired, and then deshita is past tense. So it's like, oh, you got tired and you're so honorable for that kind of thing. So both of those phrases means you worked hard, you're tired, and you're so honorable for that kind of thing. So how these phrases are actually used, most commonly you'll see people say it at the end of a workday to coworkers, at the end maybe not necessarily of a school day, because oftentimes it's not the end of the day for most of the kids, like they go on to bukatsu or clubs after that, but sometimes after the club practice, like they'll be like otsukare or something. But you'll also see it come up when people are... Hi, Thalaya. You want to go outside? Okay. Sometimes people will say otsukare like while they're still working, like character A and character B are at work and maybe it's after hours but they're still working, and then they're both at the vending machines getting some drinks, and character A is already there, and then character B walks up and says otsukare. It's like we're not necessarily finished with work yet, but we're acknowledging like, hey work buddy, we're still working. So this is another one of those phrases where it's just something we don't really say in our culture, and functionally speaking, if you say otsukare sama deshita or gokuro sama deshita to people as they're leaving or as you're leaving, it really serves more as just goodbye, good night, have a nice evening, enjoy the rest of your day, have a nice weekend. That's usually what we would say in our culture instead. So that's usually how I wind up translating those phrases. If it is that instance where, you know, you're both still at work, you haven't technically finished yet, and you say like otsukare or something like that, usually I just translate it as hi or what's up. Sometimes if the situation actually calls for it and I feel like the character would actually be saying this, particularly if a task has just been done and somebody says otsukare or gokuro sama deshita, typically more so with gokuro sama deshita, I'll translate it as good job. Right, the next pair of phrases that are kind of opposites to each other are ittekimasu and itterashai. So ittekimasu, it literally means go, come. I am going somewhere and then I'm going to come back. That's literally what it means. And then itterashai, itte, again, it means like going, and then nashai is, by itself it kind of doesn't mean much of anything except welcome. Like, I am welcoming you. Oftentimes people say, that's shy, like, come on down, step on up, welcome, welcome. But if you add it to the end of a verb like that, it's kind of a warm, welcoming kind of like, I bid you peace as you are doing this verb that I'm telling you to do. And it usually means like, go do this thing. So in those scenarios, just think about what the people are actually saying. They aren't actually saying, I'm going and then I'm coming back. And the person isn't necessarily saying, go, in response. What they're really saying is, bye, bye. That's often what we're saying. We're saying like, I'm leaving, goodbye, and there's like, cool, have a nice time. So yeah, usually when there's that exchange of ittekimasu followed by itterashai, I'll usually translate it as goodbye, and then the other person might say, have a nice day. Depending on their relationship, it might be like, I'll miss you. Sometimes they'll even translate it as that. And then sometimes depending on context, especially if that character isn't necessarily going to work, but that character will come back soon, I might say something like, I'll be back, or something. The next set of phrases that are kind of along those lines are Tadaima and Okay Nashai. So Tadaima, literally it just means just now. That's actually all it means. Ima is now, and then tada is like just, so like just now, like right now. And then okaeri, or okaeri nasai, this is the polite form of okaeri, but kaeri comes from the verb kaeru, which is to return. And then o is just that polite prefix. You'll notice a lot of these expressions use o and go and sama and like all those polite words. So tadaima actually is short for tadaima kaerimashita, which means just now I have returned. And then okaeri nasai is, nasai is kind of like a please do this kind of thing, form of a verb. So it's like, please return, or yes, please come on in, please come return. So how many of you, when you come home, you say, I am home? Weird, right? So I always cringe, again, whenever I see it translated as I'm home. Sometimes that works, okay? Some characters are the kind of characters who'd be like, I'm home, or honey, I'm home, or something, but usually people don't really say that when they come home. In fact, this is one of those instances where, at least in my social circles, where I'm from, in my experience, people don't necessarily say things when they come home. They just come home. And then maybe they'll walk into the room where another family member is and be like, hi, I just got back from work. They won't like enter the door and be like, I'm home, everybody, and then close the door, and then everybody maybe heard or maybe didn't hear them announce that they were home. And then people don't, again, I cringe when I see okaeri nasai or okaeri translated as welcome home. People don't say that, okay? They don't say it if a person was just gone to the store or if they were just gone at school for the day and then they come home. People don't typically say welcome home unless that person has been gone for a long, long time, like if they've been deployed overseas or if they've been on vacation or something. It's just, we don't say welcome home. So honestly, I'll usually just translate tadaima and okaeri nasai as like hi and hi. And again, depending on the characters, I might be like, phew, I'm home from work. And then the other character might say like, yay, I missed you, or something. Basically, I tend to get a little more creative with these phrases because we just don't really say things when people come home from things if they were only gone for a few hours or a day. Here's a phrase that you've probably heard, and it's probably one of the first phrases that you learned in elementary Japanese. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu, or just yoroshiku. This is a pretty tricky one, because it can mean so many different things depending on context. So yoroshiku by itself, it's an adverb. So it's yoroshi, which means like well done, good, acceptable, that kind of meaning. So yoroshiku is like acceptably, goodly, well, favorably. And then onegai shimasu means like please do this. So yoroshiku onegai shimasu means like please be favorable, please be good, please be nice. It's that kind of meaning. So when is this expression actually used? It is used sometimes when people are meeting other people for the first time. Like if I go into a class, you'll see this all the time in anime, like, children, we have a new transfer student. This is Yoshiko Yoshida. And she's like, hajimemashite, Yoshiko Yoshida desu. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Like that kind of thing. The hajimemashite, of course, is nice to meet you, or literally, this is the first time I'm meeting you. And then yoroshiku onegai shimasu is like, I hope we get along, I hope we all become good friends, but it can also be translated as just nice to meet you because it also has that word nice in it, the yoroshi part, yoroshiku. Basically, it's expressing the hope that this will be a good, harmonious relationship. But this doesn't only come into play when you're meeting people or when you're meeting a group of people. It can also be said, and is often said, like, if I'm going to form a group, like if I'm in a class and I get a lab partner to do a lab, we might just start by being like, yoroshiku onegai shimasu or yoroshiku before we start working. just a sort of like a, yeah, we're in this together, let's do a good job kind of thing. Again, we don't really say like, nice to meet you when we're starting working with somebody that we already know. It can also be used as a sort of like, I accept your invitation or I accept your overture. So like if a senpai asked me out and then I wanted to be super polite when I was accepting him and being like, yes, sure, I will be your girlfriend, I might say yoroshiku onegai shimasu. It's like I hope that I can be a good girlfriend kind of situation. I am humbled by the fact that you have asked me to be your girlfriend and let's do this kind of thing. That's kind of how yoroshiku onegai shimasu is used. So as you can see, since it's used in so many different scenarios and in so many different ways, there really is no one way to translate it. It can be nice to meet you, good to work with you, I look forward to working with you, I'm excited to work with you, thank you for promoting me, yes, my answer is yes, thank you, let's do this. It can mean lots of different things. That brings us to omatase shimashita, or omatase. You will often hear omatase shimashita from a waiter or a waitress. You know, you're sitting at your table and then omatase shimashita, ravioli no hito, you know, and they're like, hand out your food. And that literally means I made you wait, you honorable, important person. Mataseru means to make somebody wait, and then o and shimasu makes it polite. So in Japanese culture, they are sticklers for punctuality. If you are like 30 seconds late, you are late, and you were rude for being late, and you really need to apologize to people. But even if you're not late, even if you just happen to show up later than the other people, and you're all technically still early, you might still apologize and be like, omatase shimashita, or, you know, with a little bow, like, I'm sorry I'm late, or I'm sorry to make you wait. This is something that I actually really like about Japanese culture, because I hate it when people are late too, and I'm usually one of those people who gets there a few minutes early just to make sure that I'm not late. And I really wish that Western culture would adopt this concept, because I don't like having to leave extra early to get somewhere early, only to wait like 10 minutes late for other people that are late, and I'm basically wasting 20 minutes of my life when I could have been doing something else instead of getting there early, on the off chance that we actually start on time. Incidentally, side note, I also really like about Japanese culture that they don't say anything when people sneeze, because I have allergies and I sneeze a lot. Like, I sneeze, no exaggeration, probably at least 10 times a day, even when I'm on allergy meds. It's totally normal for me. I don't even think about it. I always carry Kleenex around with me wherever I go. And when people say gesundheit or bless you to me, I just feel self-conscious, and I don't want attention. I don't want people bringing attention to the fact that I'm sneezing. It's a pretty unattractive thing to do, to be sneezing and have snot coming out of your nose and then blow your nose, and it's just like, I wish people would let that go and just not bless me when I sneeze. It's good. I sneeze all the time. Anyway, rant over. Back to omatase. That phrase exists a lot because punctuality is so important to Japanese people, but in the States in particular, you know, we're lazy and we're frequently late, and it's just, you know, not a thing that we tend to place as much importance on. So we will apologize if we're late, like if we're 20 minutes late to something, oh my god, I'm sorry I'm late. But if, you know, you're like 30 seconds late, or if you just happen to show up later than everybody else but you're all still on time, you're not going to be like, oh, I'm sorry I made you guys wait, or I'm sorry I'm late. So omatase, oftentimes, again, I'll just translate it as hi, because it just sounds weird if a character shows up on time to a meeting place and says, sorry I made you wait. It's just weird. So I'll often just translate it as hi. So that was a list of the phrases that I could come up with off the top of my head. I spent like, you know, 10 minutes thinking about this. I'm sure after I post this video, I'll come up with a lot more phrases. If any of you watching this know of a few phrases that I didn't talk about, you can put those below in the lovely little comment section and fight about them down there. Update from the last video, I have gotten a little tiny bit more work. I expect to continue to get more and more and more work. It's just the name of the game. It's the name of freelance work, freelance translating. Work levels fluctuate. I'm doing fine though, thanks to everyone who expressed concern. And I'll see you guys next week or something. I don't know. I'm very inconsistent with these.